All right, what's going on, guys? Dana went live the other day and dropped a whole bunch of fight news announcing main events, co-main events, and just major fights and some fight cards coming up. We're gonna talk about them all now. Today, I have them all the posts in an order here, and we'll go kind of from the least exciting to the most exciting is kind of how I have them ordered, and then we'll take a look at the entire card of International Fight Week that they dropped. So obviously on the screen here I have Shara Magomedov Bullet versus Marc-Andre Barriault. Barriault's coming off of a huge win over Bruno Silva. He had to get stretchered out of the octagon, unfortunately. But, Barriault's stock is at an all-time high. Magomedov is also somebody who has a win over Bruno Silva. And they're just kind of, I feel like building either guy's stock here. They either have, another star in the Dagestani region with Shara. He's already pretty popular and people tune into his fights, or build another big Canadian star with all the momentum that Barriault has just off of last weekend. I'm surprised that this fight got booked so quickly after Barriault's performance. Like, he instantly got on the phone and they offered him Shara Bullet. I think this is a good matchup, quick turnaround. He didn't take much damage. Really exciting fight, probably going to be a main card fight on this Abu Dhabi card. Maybe even the co-main. I know Shara's usually co-main to featured fight whenever he's on those, but can't wait for this one. Kind of surprised he got its own post. I mean, I guess because considering that they were on the, pretty sure Marc-Andre was on the early prelims of the UFC 315 last weekend, and now he's going to be on the main card of this one. But someone's probably going to get knocked out here. Pretty exciting matchup. And we go down, and this was actually just announced today. This one wasn't by Dana, but it was officially confirmed that Chito Vera is out of his fight on June 7th on 316, and replacing him will be former Bellator champion Patchy Mix. And this is super exciting. It gets Patchy potentially right in the top 10, and it's a watch for a lot of fans where Mario Batista had a pretty infamous performance against Jose Aldo, kind of held him against the cage the whole time. Didn't do any damage, didn't really have any output, and a lot of people will probably hate watching this fight, which is kind of funny, myself included. But it's exciting. Patchy Mix was just released, I think at the same time they were doing Dana's announcements. The PFL put out some posts saying, we're parting ways with Patchy, and then he was immediately in talks with the UFC, and it's kind of perfect timing, in his division, with the type of opponent that he'd probably get matched up against right away, similar to how Patricio did. We get Patchy Mix versus Mario Batista coming up on the very next pay-per-view. This is pretty exciting, like I said. A lot of implications at bantamweight for this one, because even if Batista wins, he gets a former Bellator champion, a 20-1 guy under his belt, and I'm just excited for this one. Honestly, I think it's a better fight than Chito versus Batista. I think that had the potential to be pretty boring, but like I said, I'm excited for Patchy's debut. And now we're into the super hype fights that Dana announced, and we're going to be looking at that right after. But we have 319's main event, Dricus du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev, is official for UFC Chicago, UFC 319. Finally, this fight had me so hyped seeing this announced. I mean, we didn't know, was Dricus injured? Were they going to do an interim? What was the timetable for return? Would this be Abu Dhabi main event, in October? But no, we're getting it this summer in August. And it's the fight that everyone wants to see. It's the fight the champion called for. It's the fight that Chimaev's been calling for years now in terms of his title fight. And just both guys' stock at an all-time high. And I couldn't be more excited for this one. I think this is middleweight's finally in a place again where it's super exciting. And Dricus is, he might be the fluke master champion. He always wins in the wackiest ways, but he's undeniable. He keeps winning. Khamzat keeps winning, and this is just an immovable object versus an unstoppable force. It's gonna be chaos. Someone's gonna get finished, I'm assuming, and I cannot wait for UFC 319. Can't wait to see how the card fills out a bit more. I don't know if we have any other confirmed fights for 319 yet, but this is now confirmed, and then I'm sure as the over the course of the next month or two here, we'll get the rest of the filled out card for 319. But the big one that people have been waiting for, because it's so close around the corner, UFC 317, we are waiting for the event of UFC 315 to wrap up to determine, the lightweight division, the welterweight division, what was going to happen. And it's official. We have 2 title fights on 317. The co-main first, we have Alessandro Pantoja versus Kai Kara-France. This was rumored. I think it was rumored for 316. It was kind of confirmed, leaked, rumored, not confirmed. And now it's official for 317, co-main event. I mean, I don't know if necessarily that Kai Kara-France is the most deserving guy in the division for the title shot, but it'll keep Pantoja active. I think it's a winnable fight for Pantoja. He already has a win over Kai Kara-France, I believe, on the Ultimate Fighter. And it's just another guy to defend his belt against, build his legacy. He's one of my favorite champions right now, and I can't wait to watch him in International Fight Week. I always get hyped when I see Pantoja news. And he's going against a guy with big KO power. It's going to be an exciting fight no matter what. And the main event, officially confirming that Islam Makhachev has vacated the lightweight title. We have, for the official lightweight title, Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira for the vacant title. Islam will be vacating the second this fight starts, and it's going to be for the vacant title, similar to how Volkanovski versus Lopez was at 314 for the vacant title, obviously with Topuria vacating that division to move up to lightweight. So just off the top of my head, initial thoughts on all these fights, all these title fights, especially. Super excited. I think that I really wanted to see Topuria versus Islam. It's a shame that we have to miss that, but Charles is finally getting his actual title shot. His last few fights have been #1 contender fights. Topuria gets right in there with the best of the best still at lightweight, and obviously we have another big title fight at flyweight. Pantoja building his legacy. I can't wait for either of these. They're going to be so exciting to watch, and they fill out a card that we're going to take a look at here. This is a stacked card. Now, not just the first 2 fights here with the main and co-main. Featured fight, as of right now, is slotted to Paulo Costa versus Roman Kopylov. Kopylov gets his jump up in competition. He had a good fight with Chris Curtis, and I think Paulo Costa, this is a good fight for him because it's winnable, and it can get him back in that win column against a ranked guy. But it's also the step down that he needed. You couldn't keep just giving him top 5 guys over and over, because he's only won 1 fight since, I think, 2020. He's like 1-4 in his last 5. So it's a step back in competition, but a step up for Roman. A fight that I'm excited to see. Both guys bring the violence for sure. I think that we'll probably see a finish in that fight. But either way, I think that one's going to be a war. And right below that, we have Beneil Dariush versus Renato Moicano. This is obviously rebooked from UFC 311, where Moicano stepped in on short notice to fill in for Arman Tsarukyan. And now we're getting it rebooked. Some people really wanted the Mauricio Rufy fight for Dariush. I know he called for it, but it makes sense to rebook this one. It was booked originally. They both trained for each other. Beneil kind of got screwed a little bit out of his matchup, and this is the fight that he wanted, clearly, and he gets that again, and I'm excited for it. I think it's a matchup that makes sense. Renato did get finished pretty easily by Islam. It's kind of a step back, a more winnable fight for him. And obviously Dariush, it's, I think, a guy there's a path to victory for Dariush here, and it's not as dangerous of a fight as the last few that he's taken. Obviously coming off of, Arman and Charles losses, both by KO. So I'm excited for that one. It's going to be an exciting fight to kind of see the positioning in lightweight, because we obviously have the title on the line later in the night. Now, I don't know why they have this placed here, if this is like an official placement, but Jonata Denise versus Justin Tafa. I hope this isn't on the main card. It really doesn't make sense to have this above Royval versus Kopp, but I mean, Denise and Tafa are both guys that I just don't rate very highly. I mean, it'll probably be a finish, but Justin Tafa is just a punching bag, and I don't know. I'm not super excited for this one. It's a heavyweight fight. It is what it is. They always throw one on every pay-per-view just to, try and have some relevancy in that division again, and they're always either super boring or they can be an exciting finish, but there's, neither of these guys are even ranked, and the top 15 in heavyweight is very, it's not a very fleshed out division. It's pretty weak through its rankings even. I think unless you're in the top 5 or top 7, you're not the most skilled fighter on the roster. So to have 2 unranked guys up here doesn't really make sense. But I mean, either way, it's it's something. I hope it ends up shuffling down to being on the prelims, because right below it we have a #1 contenders fight that also has implications for later in the card for who's potentially fighting Pantoja or Kai Kara France, whoever wins that matchup. We have Brandon Royval versus Manel Kopp. This has also been rebooked from what was supposed to be Manel versus Brandon at the Apex a couple months ago. It turned into Almabayev versus Manel Kopp, and Manel obviously got the eye poke KO there. But I'm excited for this one. This is what I wanted to see in the first place. I think that if Royval wins, he's making a strong case. You know, he's coming off of an absolute beatdown over Brandon Moreno and a very good win over Tetsuro Taira. I think it's tough because, like, if Pantoja wins, it's like, oh, Pantoja's already beat him, you know, a couple times, but he's been on a tear. Manel Kopp's also been on a tear. I think Manel Kopp already also has lost to Pantoja, but at this point, it's like Pantoja's beaten everybody. You know, you just have to give it to the best guy and then hope for a great fight, which is what we've gotten so far at flyweight. It's always exciting fights, and I cannot wait for that one. That one is going to be like the banger sleeper fight of the night on the card. And right below that, we have two actually exciting unranked guys. We have Jack Hermansson versus RoboCop, Gregory Rodriguez. Rodriguez obviously coming off of a pretty brutal loss to Jared Cannonier, but I mean, it showed levels. You know, it's hard to go from being unranked to fighting the number 8th ranked guy in your first main event. That's quite a jump he should have probably had. You know, a guy like a Hermansson who is a fringe top 15 type guy, this matchup's a lot more his pace. Hermansson's the type of guy to fight once a year or every 2 years and then just bounce, never be seen from again, you know, get his money, leave. He's also a guy who, if you followed his career, he's win one, lose one for the past about 4 years. And I think he's coming off of that Joe Pyfer kind of fraud check. So if I was a betting man, I would say pick RoboCop here. But no, this one's going to be exciting. I think that both guys have had pretty exciting fights at middleweight. It'll probably be a pretty good back and forth, you know, striking match. And it's just a fight that I'm all around looking forward to in terms of, you know, it's definitely the best of the unranked fights that's been announced. And then we have Viviane Araujo versus Tracy Cortez. Not a lot of stake in this fight. You know, it's a top 10, top 8 flyweight women's bout. We always cheer for Tracy Cortez here, and we'll be doing that on UFC 317. So let me know, you guys, what do you think of UFC 317 as a card so far, and just all of the fights. You know, we have Patchy Mix's debut, Barry jump up in competition, and Shara's next fight bouncing back off that MVP loss, Dricus versus Chimaev, and Topuria versus Oliveira, and Pantoja versus Kai Kara France. What's the fight that you guys are most excited for? I would say that mine is probably Dricus versus Chimaev, or probably Topuria versus Oliveira. And we'll be doing a video this weekend on Gilbert Burns versus Michael Morales, probably a tier list. And yeah, I'll see you.